Welcome into Clipboard Conversations. I'm John Folke, joined by Hornets assistant coach Chad Iske. Coach, this is the new normal. This is kind of where we're at right now. It's been about a month since the season was suspended. During that time, how have you filled the days? What's been taking up your time?
Well, I got two young daughters at home, and so they aren't in school, of course, and they're only preschool age anyway, but that keeps me more than busy through the daylight hours.
How much fun is it just being around the family? And we think about, through the course of the NBA season, it's so challenging to get to spend quality time with your family. And now you get that opportunity, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's, you have to take advantage of it, at least in that way, because it does come so far and few between during the regular season, especially, that you got to take advantage of this time and make the most of it. And we've had good weather here, been able to get outside to keep that cabin fever from really setting in. But it's been good.
We heard from JB a couple of weeks ago. He's been into the cooking shows. He's really been getting after it in the kitchen. Cody Zeller, we've seen him putting his dad through workouts and learning guitar. Devontae Graham bought a bike. Is there anything during this time period that you have focused your efforts on that maybe you never had an opportunity to explore because you didn't have the time?
There hasn't been a lot of just like personal growth stuff for me in it. With my girls, I've become a preschool teacher, I guess you'd say. Each day I got about 30 minutes with each of them separately. We do little lessons, and luckily their little schools have Zoom sessions as well, so I get to help them in on those. But then we get on the TV. I'm an expert in Disney Plus these days, to say the least, and also little kids exercise classes on there. It keeps you busy.
Now, speaking of keeping busy, we saw over the weekend ESPN televised the horse competition, and I know that you've got that long ball, the half court shot. Jay Triano's pretty good with the trick shot. So as we think about a horse competition involving either the Hornets coaching staff or the Hornets coaching staff and the players, who do you think would be maybe a front runner for who you would put your money on in that competition?
I'm going to obviously got to go with Triano. He's got, every different shot in the book. There's so many shots that nobody else has even thought about that he throws into his arsenal there on a daily basis. Him and then Devontae, I think we had a couple different times during the year where we had little shooting games, and Devontae seemed to rise to the occasion each time. So I think, I'd put my money on those two to be the front runners.
Anybody, a dark horse that maybe fans wouldn't think of that has some trick shots like that, or like a big guy that's got some range that they don't really show off at all?
Biz has been working on that three ball all year long. He's yet to show it in a game. I don't know if I'm going to give him trick shot level of stuff, but be ready in the future for Biz's three ball coming out. He's had that in the works. We're just waiting to debut it.
We've seen Biz working out quite a bit. His Instagram, he's doing different daily workouts, and I think it's been fascinating during this time to be able to peek in on the lives of the players. How have you guys, as a coaching staff, kind of kept touch with each other, with the guys, and just kind of shared messages, thoughts, and stayed connected during this time?
I think Coach has been really good with keeping up with everybody. We just got off a few minutes ago with kind of a Zoom session with the coaching staff, just checking in where everybody's at, seeing what everybody's doing. Obviously he had the players in the playoff series that they watched. We've continued that. The coaches have all been in on that as well. And we're watching kind of individual older playoff games too. It gives us just a common ground to talk about, and for us to reach out to the players and talk to them about too, just kind of as we're checking in on them. Just to keep our basketball juices flowing when we can't get on the court the way we want to.
That playoff series must have been easy for you to jump into because you were an assistant coach with Denver during that time.
Yeah, that was kind of nice. He had thrown a few possible situations out there, and I said, well, I unfortunately didn't end up on the good end of that series, but it was a great series, a great learning experience, and thought it'd be really good for our young group of guys, kind of a younger team taking on a very star-ridden team with Kobe and Gasol and Bynum and those guys in LA, and having their backs against the wall and fighting all the way to the last seconds of a Game 7, taking it to the limit was a great growth process for us when I was in Denver, and something for the young guys here in Charlotte to learn from, I think.
Was it fun for you personally to go back and look at that series? I imagine, it's been a number of years since you went back play-by-play and watched that series. Was it fun to think back on kind of everything that was involved in those 7 games?
Definitely. I mean, you remember the big pieces, a lot of the big situations and end-of-game situations per se, but it's amazing to see how much the game has changed in just that short amount of time, in less than a decade. And, the thoughts you had about how we played back then, and then just seeing it and relating it to now, you see it in a definite different light.
I remember those Denver teams under George Karl, and I think what stands out to me just in terms of how you guys played at that time and how the NBA has played is it was relatively positionless basketball. When you think about pushing the pace all the time, you had a lot of guys that could handle the basketball. There wasn't necessarily a traditional big man, maybe not as committed to the three-pointer as teams are now, but in terms of positionless, you guys were maybe on the cutting edge of that.
Yeah, I think, George historically was ahead of his time in a lot of offensive thought processes, I believe, and was one of the best coaches of all time and one of the best offensive coaches of all time. And, he was really big into, having more decision makers out there, 2, 3-point guards at a time, whatever it takes. We can deal with the other side of the ball when we have to. But, he was, let's get our best players on the floor as much as we can, and let's get them in situations to help each other and help the team be better. And I think that team was evident with that. And, he really preached back at that time too. I mean, we liked the 3-ball a lot. We didn't have a lot of great shooters, so we weren't able to show it as much as possible, but we really loved to attack the rim. I think we led the league. Well, we led the league in scoring, but we definitely led the league in points in the paint. And it was all about getting to the rim with that group that we had and finding different ways to do that.
And George Karl, one of the best storytellers, I think, in the NBA. His pregame media, when he used to come when I was in Minnesota, we would just sit and someone would lob him a question and everyone would lean back and say, just go, George. What were some of the things or stories, memories that you have working alongside him and learning from him early in your coaching career?
I think just every day as a whole, being around him was great. And being the stage he was in his career, and for me at the beginning of my career and being very young, it was great because he was in such a comfortable position that we could be very combative, in the office and face to face. And he would let me voice my opinions and have big opinions, knowing that he knew what he wanted to do and how he wanted to do stuff. And that I couldn't make his confidence waver at all, but he let me challenge him, and he let me have a voice. But ultimately just listening to him and some of the great assistants he had with him, and going back to even Doug Moe was there with us at the beginning when he took over, and the stories those guys had just in general, life, basketball, whatever. I mean, you can't replace any of that. So just our whole existence as a whole it was a great memory.
And kind of to keep on that theme, the NBA announced the players that are going to be going into the Hall of Fame, their Hall of Fame class last week. And a number of them are guys that you coached against throughout the course of your career. Of course, Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett. What was it like competing against some of those guys and now seeing them heading into the Hall of Fame, especially all together?
No, it makes you realize how lucky you were to be a part of it and to be a part of the same game at the same time as those guys were. I think we all get caught up as competitors, and you get into it and your off factor goes away, and you hate them because they're on the other team and you think they're getting too many calls or this and that. And, but to be able to look back and, recently I pulled out, we were lucky enough to coach the All-Star game once when I was in Denver, and the collection of what you said, Duncan and Kobe were a part of that team, and Steve Nash and some of the other guys that were there, and you got to share a locker room with them and listen to them talk and see them up close all together is just, it's one of those things that's irreplaceable, and as time goes on, you value it more and more.
when you think about the sum of your experiences and what JB, his experiences in San Antonio and Jay Triano and really on down the line of this coaching staff, how can you guys use some of the things that you've learned throughout the course of your career to help guys continue to get better during this hiatus, whether it's through watching film or just one-off sharing stories and things like that?
I think it's what you said. I think the playoff series thing was a great start and an idea by coach in order to just get them thinking the game and seeing some of those older players. Because we take it for granted. We might have been a part of some of those series. I remember vividly watching it, and you forget how young a lot of our players are. And you think, 10 years ago for us doesn't seem like that long in a lot of respects. For them, some of them were in grade school, and there's no way they remember what they saw or what, who some of those players were. And I think it helps to create a common ground for us to all, to talk about and share, and then, try to relate it back to them as people, and the good thing when we can say, or I can say that, man, I was a part of that series of that 7 games you watched. And did you see how Andre Miller did this and how he set up his teammates or that? Like, I see that in you, or, he really liked to do this. And, I think it helps give them another thing to relate to them about, and see and try to put them on an equal playing field with some of those guys.
Well, Chad, we'll wrap up. And as we wrap up, just a couple of questions, not necessarily basketball focused, but surrounding basketball. Are you a big reader? Do you have like a favorite basketball book or a favorite sports book or movie that you like to watch and that you might recommend to folks?
I'm admittedly not as big a reader as I should be. I think every off season I go into it and get through one or get halfway through one, and then life takes over. And so I'd like to read more. The podcast thing has been good. I've tried to get more into that as recently to help that. But basketball, movies, growing up when I did, there's nothing could replace Hoosiers for me as far as a basketball movie goes, especially being a young kid from the Midwest in a small town. I think that movie came out when I was probably in 3rd or 4th grade, something like that. And so there's Hoosiers will always hold a special place, even though I'm not from Indiana.
I agree completely. And a couple of years ago, I went and I found this deluxe package of Hoosiers. And so it was the DVD of the actual movie. Yep. And then there was a separate DVD that had the entire film of the actual game.
Yeah, totally. I have the same thing. Amazing. And just one offshoot story, when I was really early on in my days in Denver, I was lucky enough to work with Coach John McLeod, a great NBA legend. And I remember talking to him once about it, and he was actually a young kid in attendance of that game. He was like an 8th grader or something, not quite in high school, and actually was at the state championship game that's, that Hoosiers is based on. So it was a kind of a real add an extra little layer to it.
That's fantastic. All right, we'll get you out of here on this one. Our final question for you. We've talked about a number of games that you have been a part of as an assistant coach. What's maybe the best sporting event that you have been a part of, whether as a coach, as a fan, as a player, even going back to when you played? Is there anything that stands out?
There's a ton of great moments. Going back to college and being a part of KU, even though I wasn't a part of the actual team, there was some great moments there, of course. Being in Denver when we finally broke through and made it out of the first round of the playoffs, and we had a good run into the conference finals, I think in like 2009. There were multiple moments there, but I think we had it wasn't a clinching game, but we had a game against New Orleans that we won by 58 points, I think. I think it might be the largest margin of victory in NBA playoff history, actually. That moment there of being a part of that when you've been struggling to get out of the first round, and I think it was a game 4 to put us up 3-1 against Chris Paul in New Orleans. All of a sudden I think we all realized how good we were, and we had a chance to maybe make a run at a championship, and that was a pretty good NBA moment.
You got to bring that one back to JB and say, hey, we got to look at this film.
That's right.
Chad, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining this week's episode of Clipboard Conversations. Continue to stay safe, continue to stay healthy, and best to you and your family.
Great. Likewise. Thanks a lot, John. Appreciate it.
All right. That is Chad Iske joining us on this week's episode of Clipboard Conversations on Hornets.com.